Hello, I am Jose Rizalba, Professor of Marketing at the University of Westminster and leader of the research group Service Research and Customer Experience. I am honored to introduce Dr. Jialin Snow-Wu. She is a reader in marketing at the University of Huddersfield here in the United Kingdom. Snow integrates elements of behavioral science, social psychology, information technology, and human geography to improve customer experience, quality of life, and sustainability. She has published in top journals such as Annals of Tourism Research, Tourism Management, and Journal of Travel Research. All of them are 4 stars here in the ABS ranking list in the UK. The topic of her presentation will be the power of immersive customer experience, how and when Tryvertising works in peer-to-peer accommodation. So, Snow, thanks for being here with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Joseph. Thanks for the great introduction. So I don't have to spend time to introduce myself anymore. So I would like to just go directly into the topic we're going to discuss today. So as Professor Joseph just mentioned, this research was published in Annals of Tourism Research. It's a 4-star journal in UK ranking, and this is one of the top journals in terms of consumer behavior, tourism experience, so on and so forth. So the title of this research is called How and When Tryvertising Works in P2P Accommodations. So which is peer-to-peer accommodations, for example, Airbnb. So we try to investigate how Tryvertising might work, beyond, the shopping mall context or beyond the hotel context, actually could work in a peer-to-peer accommodation context, which is Airbnb, for example. We also publish, based on this recent research, we also published a media article in Conversation. So the editor slightly, after discussion with the editor, we slightly changed the direction for a media publication. We focus more on how it can benefit local community as well as customers. So if you have interest, you can also have a look about this Conversation article. Right, so I'm going to make the full screen. If you got any issues with seeing the screen and hearing from my voice, just let me know in chat in the box. I can have a look. Right, so as I mentioned before, Tryvertising is something has been widely practiced in quite a lot of contexts, for example, including hotel context. You may notice when you stay in a hotel, you can see there are some branded soup or branded shampoo. It's actually sponsored by certain brands. For example, in Renaissance hotels in UK, Aveda Rosemary Mint, it's the brand of Aveda, which is very good brand for shampoo, distribute their products in the hotels. And that's very, very efficient Tryvertising strategy because people get to know, okay, how nice by using Aveda, as a shampoo or shower gel. So we just wonder whether Tryvertising could work in other contexts, especially in a context might be more natural, like a home rather than a hotel context. So the definition of Tryvertising, I assume all of you, like marketers, marketing researchers, you might already know what is Tryvertising. So just briefly mention, Tryvertising is an advertising strategy that could provide consumers a direct experience of products or service by trying them out and before purchasing them. So the advantage is to help customers to get familiar with the products in the real context, and then customer could, develop attachment to the products and make the purchasing decision. As I mentioned, Tryvertising is a promising advertising strategy in hotels. It works very well in some of the hotels, especially like luxury hotels. But not many research has been done regarding, whether Tryvertising could work in peer-to-peer accommodation, such as Airbnb, and how it works. So when compared to hotels, the home feeling of Airbnb, such as photos like this, provides a more natural context for customers to try out the products. The context is more natural, it's more home feeling, and the Tryvertising strategy could be more effective. That's what I assume. So how we get this research idea actually is it was from my true story. Is like, when we travel, when we stay in Airbnb, we just got that idea and then we seek the idea further into a research, into experimental research. So a few years ago, probably it's not a few years ago, almost 10 years ago, we spent a weekend getaway at Airbnb. And when I tried to keep that morning with a cup of coffee, I just, very delighted to see there is very nice coffee maker in that Airbnb open kitchen. I was told by Airbnb host we can use everything, we see in that Airbnb. So I just try out. That is an espresso, coffee machine using the pod. So I tried the coffee maker to make espresso and also try this, use it to make a cappuccino. So in the rest of few days, I use that coffee machine every day. And I just find out it's so easy to use and the coffee quality is really good. It's beyond my expectation. So after getting home, I realized I should have the same coffee machine at home as I wanted to use because I wanted to use every day. And the whole story just ended up with me getting the same coffee maker with exactly the same brand, same model, and even the same color because I was so fond of that coffee machine. And with that trying out experience in Airbnb, such a natural context, I feel like I am at home and I could use it. I probably should use it every day. So this experience just illustrate the potential effectiveness of Tryvertising in a peer-to-peer accommodation context. And then I start seeking some collaborations, some scholars also interested in this research idea. And later on, we find out there is a concept called territoriality could maybe could be able to explain the difference between hotel and Airbnb. So there's a recent research indicate that human territoriality offers a new perspective on peer-to-peer accommodation. So perceived territoriality can be complicated, but particularly important in affecting customers' feelings and subsequent behaviors. So the difference between hotel and Airbnb, because the perceived territoriality could be different. For example, in a peer-to-peer accommodation context like Airbnb, the home feeling feature is one of the signature feature for Airbnb when they promote their products, their services, their platform, right? So when we stay in the Airbnb, we feel like at home. We feel like this is a space. We feel like a stronger sense of ownership towards this rental space. So it gives us a higher perceived territoriality towards the space. So we believe such a high perceived territoriality of peer-to-peer accommodation may help to increase the effectiveness of Tryvertising because it is more natural and we have more control of the space. We feel safer. We feel like we are at home. So it's highly possible it is easy to develop attachment towards the products within that space. Then we also think about, okay, so what could be the factor that territoriality influence before people make a purchasing decision making? For example, psychological ownership. So we're thinking about, as I just mentioned, when we stay at Airbnb, we feel like a high perceived territoriality, we feel more attachment to the product, we feel strong perceived control towards the space, and we feel higher ownership towards the products within that space. However, we find out, even though, perceived territoriality and psychological ownership has been investigated separately in prior research in the existing literature, but they were either investigated separately or used interchangeably. So some research actually, confuse the ideas between territoriality and psychological ownership. And there's very, very limited research studied the relationship between these two concepts. And also even less research focus on how the two concepts, the two variables could work together to influence Tryvertising effectiveness. So this is one of the first research gaps we found in previous literature. And when we look at the psychological ownership literature, we know psychological ownership is very, very popular, widely used, widely investigated concept in marketing area. However, we find out there's still loads of space, loads of chance to investigate the antecedents of psychological ownership. And particularly in prior research, people indicated psychological ownership is quite context specific. But not many research has investigated, how psychological ownership change according to different contexts. For example, people may develop stronger feelings of ownership towards amenities in the Airbnb during their, Airbnb staying experience rather than a hotel setting, as I just mentioned, because people have this is more like a home, they feel safer, they feel more relaxed, and they're easy to develop their ownership towards those products, as I just mentioned, I feel like that coffee machine is mine, and I really wish to have a similar one when I get back to home. So although recent research has investigated some determinants of psychological ownership, but no research or very limited research has investigated perceived territoriality as a determinant of psychological ownership. And also, it is unclear about the role of psychological ownership as a mechanism underlying the Tryvertising effectiveness in accommodation settings. Then this is a second research gap in our research. So the final research gap we found is there is limited evidence about what could be an efficient, effective moderator to regulate the relationship between territoriality, psychological ownership, and purchase intention towards the Tryvertised products. There is a recent research published in Journal of Marketing indicates a new concept which is relevant to sharing economy. Actually, it's relevant to peer-to-peer accommodation context. So this concept is called impermanence. So impermanence refers to the situation where individuals no longer expect to keep the goods, assuming goods will be returned to owners. So you can see from the definition of the concept, it will be highly relevant to sharing economy, because in sharing economy context, we're supposed to return the goods to the owners. So then when we come to the context of Tryvertised products in Airbnb, because we are trying out those services, amenities, coffee machine, smart speakers, those kind of Tryvertised products, we know we are going to return to the owners. But sometimes it's not very obvious to know. Sometimes would be very obvious to know. For example, if the host signed a reminder, some of the note, like you need to wash that coffee machine every time you use, please keep a good condition of that coffee machine. Those kind of notes left by the host will just give you a silent reminder of the impermanence of using those coffee machine. And those silent reminder of the impermanence can threaten people's psychological ownership towards those products. And also, it will have a negative impact on the subsequent purchase behavior if the psychological ownership reduces. So we assume there could be a moderating effect of impermanence moderate the relationship between territoriality, psychological ownership, and purchase behaviors. But we also find there is almost no research has ever tested the role of impermanence as a moderator effect, affecting these relationships. So this is the final major research gap we found. So based on the above research gaps, this research, we aim to examine the Tryvertising effectiveness in different accommodation settings. So we assume hotel compared to Airbnb. Airbnb has a higher perceived territoriality for consumers, where hotel will have a lower perceived territoriality for consumers, for guests. And within the Airbnb context, we also try to differentiate different types of property. So we know when we rent Airbnb, we got the chance to rent the entire property if we have a group of friends, traveling together with families. Sometimes we prefer the entire property. So we assume the entire property, no need to share any space with the owners or other group of guests. Actually, you can get higher perceived territoriality compared to you just rent one private room and you have to share living room, share the open kitchen with the host or with other guests. So the second research objective is we try to uncover the underlying mechanism by testing the mediation role of psychological ownership. And we try to investigate the moderator of Tryvertising effectiveness by testing the effect of impermanence on regulating the interrelationship between the key constructs. So this research is mainly based on some of the literature, some of the theories before. For example, drawing on human territoriality theory. So human territoriality theory is talking about why and how people attempt to maintain control over a specific space. And the psychological owner theory, as we all probably very familiar with, is why and how people may experience ownership feeling towards objects that we do not really legally possess. So based on these theories, we propose a moderated mediation model, and we tested the model using 4 experimental studies among UK consumers. So this is the model we propose. As you can see, that we assume that territoriality, different level of territoriality could make a difference in terms of psychological ownership. And in turn, it can impact our purchase intention towards the Tryvertised products. And we believe the impermanence of Tryvertising products is actually could moderate the relationship between perceived territoriality and purchase intention, as well as could moderate the mediation effect. Right, something further in detail talking about human territoriality theory. So according to human territoriality theory, perceived territoriality may differ in different Tryvertising contexts. And the customer's perceived territoriality tends to be higher in the context of Airbnb than in the hotel setting. Because, as I just mentioned before, emphasized before, Airbnb provides a strong sense of home and people can easily develop a sense of control over the space. And within Airbnb, different room types also provides a different sense of control over the space. As I just mentioned before, the entire space gives people a higher territoriality because when you stay there, the entire place just implies an exclusive use of the amenities. The prior research also indicates territoriality can help people to establish and control their relationship with the elements of daily life. So we expect and we assume high perceived territoriality in the environment can lead to one's increased commitment and connectedness to the object within that specific environment. So this is how we develop hypothesis 1. And according to psychological ownership theory, we know that when psychological ownership towards a target product is established, It can help to increase consumers' engagement with that particular product. And the feeling of that product is mine can also strengthen consumers' emotional attachment. And thus can lead to increased purchase intention. Perceived territoriality refers to guests' perception of control over the space, while psychological ownership refers to guests' feeling of ownership towards Tryvertising product outside the space, inside the accommodation space. So as I mentioned before, in the previous literature, people confuse in using territoriality, psychological ownership interchangeably. But actually in this research, we differentiate this concept in a clearly way. So territoriality refers people's perception of control over the space, but psychological ownership is focusing on the products, the feelings of ownership towards the Tryvertised products. So the target is different. The previous research already indicates, how psychological ownership can affect people's purchasing intention towards certain products. And in this we also find some evidence in previous research that territoriality perception can also give people, impact people's feeling of psychological ownership. So in this research context, we propose hypothesis 2 as high perceived territoriality can lead to high purchase intention towards Tryvertised products due to a higher psychological ownership over the Tryvertised products. So psychological ownership plays as a mediator in this research framework. So the last hypothesis 3 and hypothesis 4 is about the moderating role of impermanence and the moderated mediation relationship between impermanence, psychological ownership, territoriality, and purchase intention. As I mentioned, briefly introduce what is impermanence before, I just want to mention that the theory of liquid consumption and sharing economy is also related to the concept of impermanence. So that's why we believe the use of impermanence in this context is highly relevant. So according to the theory of liquid consumption, a temporal relationship with the object can inhibit or serve as a barrier for people to develop emotional attachment. And it's very natural to believe that it will threaten the formation of psychological ownership. So impermanence could regulate the relationship between territoriality, psychological ownership, and purchase intention. So, and then we propose hypothesis 3 and hypothesis 4 as this format. So for example, how impermanence could work and how we test it in our study is we know, if some hosts sending very, very strict house rules regarding regulating guest behavior in using those amenities, this will just give you a very strong feeling of impermanence of using those amenities. And such cues of impermanence, especially in the low territoriality setting, especially when people are already sharing space with other guests or sharing space with the host by just renting a private room in Airbnb, which is a low territoriality setting. Such cues of impermanence will just make things worse and make people even more unlikely to develop commitment, sense of ownership, and also purchasing intention towards the Tryvertised products. People just feel like this is not my space. I feel very low territoriality, and also you're constantly sending cues of impermanence. I just feel like it's not my thing. I couldn't really develop any psychological ownership. So this is how we develop this hypothesis. Right, as I mentioned before, regarding methodology, how to test the model, we use experimental research. We actually designed 4 studies. So the first 3 studies were designed to test hypothesis 1 and 2, to test the relationship between perceived territoriality and purchase intention and the mediating effect of psychological ownership. And the last study was designed to test the moderator and the moderated mediation relationship with manipulation regarding impermanence. So study 1 and study 2A, we use coffee machine as example of Tryvertising, but we also wish to replicate the study findings with other products. So we use smart speakers in study 2B to replicate the findings of study 2A. So for study 1, as I mentioned before, we try to confirm the relationship between perceived territoriality and purchase intention, as well as the psychological ownership as a mediator. So we use a one-factor between subject design experiment to compare the perceived territoriality between Airbnb and the hotel. So in this context, we assume Airbnb is high territoriality and hotel context is low territoriality. And the results show that in the high territoriality condition, which is in the Airbnb condition, that consumers have higher purchase intention towards the Tryvertised products than people in the hotel condition. And also by using process model 4 bootstrapping analysis, we confirm psychological ownership is a significant mediator in the relationship. So hypothesis 1 and 2 was supported by the experimental results. And study 2 has two, as I mentioned, there are two sub-studies. So study 2A, we test the role of perceived territoriality by manipulating high and low territoriality using an entire property and a private room in the Airbnb. So in this context, we just in study 2, we just focus on within Airbnb context rather than compare between Airbnb and hotel. So we believe even within Airbnb, that could be different territoriality context. When people stay in an entire property, we assume it is high territoriality. And when people share space with others and just rent a private room, then it is low territoriality for consumers. In study 2A, we use coffee machine as example for Tryvertising. And in study 2B, we just replicate the experiment using a different product, which is smart speaker. Then actually, we find out either coffee machines, such as some products like utilitarian products, and the findings are similar to hedonic products like smart speakers. So with the results of both studies, we find out actually the results are quite consistent, and we further support hypothesis 1 and hypothesis 2. In study 3, we try to test the moderating effect of impermanence. And as you can see from the figure, actually, we find out in the private room in a low territoriality condition. So there is a significant difference between low impermanence and high impermanence condition. So which means in the low territoriality condition, people are more sensitive about the cues of low impermanence. As I mentioned before, if the host constantly sending signals about high impermanence, such as please keep this coffee machine in good condition and wash it every time after use, it just makes people even more unlikely to develop a psychological ownership towards the Tryvertised coffee machine and even less purchasing intention towards the Tryvertised products. So hypothesis 3, in this sense, has been supported. And we also tested a moderated mediation analysis by using process model 8. And we find out actually hypothesis 4 is also supported. In the low territoriality conditions, we find out people's psychological ownership is also reduced and also purchase intention. So hypothesis 4 is supported. Right, so to conclude findings and conclusions a little bit, according to our research, we can find different accommodation environment actually will indicate different degrees of territoriality. And according to our research, we find that Airbnb, has high territoriality than a hotel context. So that's why that could explain why people have a more sense of ownership and also stronger purchase intention when they stay in Airbnb rather than in a hotel. And within the Airbnb context, the entire property actually show higher territoriality than the private room. And we find out Tryvertising is more effective in the Airbnb than the hotel, and more effective in the entire Airbnb property than the private room in an Airbnb. And then our finding also highlight a high impermanence, such as strict house rules sending by the host, could threaten psychological ownership as well as the purchase intention towards the Tryvertised products. And in this sense, we may wish to suggest hosts, could you please avoid sending overly restrictive messages? If you really wish to place some products within your property, you may wish to bear in mind about this message. So our research also addressed some of the research gaps, as mentioned before. So our study actually enhanced the understanding of human territoriality in affecting Tryvertising effectiveness with specific insights for peer-to-peer accommodation literature. Because, territoriality concept as well as this theory hasn't been widely applied with strong evidence in the peer-to-peer accommodation literature. And we also take a step forward to provide new understanding, new nuance by showcasing how territorialities of accommodation, for example, between hotel and Airbnb, entire property and private room, would affect one's purchase intentions through psychological ownership. So this mediating relationship is something new, and we provide, very new evidence about it. And our study also contribute to both psychological ownership literature and sharing economy literature by theorizing and introducing impermanence as a significant moderator in regulating the interrelationship between those constructs. This is purely new to the existing knowledge of the field. As I mentioned before, we got this concept from a newly published impermanence from a newly published research in Journal of Marketing, and that is a conceptual study. And we just utilize this conceptual study as our theoretical background and introduce a new concept and try to investigate the possibility of that concept to be a moderator, to be a boundary effect. And this study will also build a moderated mediation model, which could serve as a sound theoretical underpinning for a better understanding of liquid consumption and the sharing economy, with a particular focus on Tryvertising effectiveness. So these are the theoretical contribution of this research. But more interestingly is the implication, practical implication, and the potential impacts. So as you can see from this research result, and as we also write in our conversation article, so the result of this study actually could have different impacts, to different stakeholders. For example, for hosts, Tryvertising it could be a new resource avenues for the hosts and the promising business opportunities for the hosts. If we give some advice to Airbnb hosts, then they may wish to increase guests' perceived territoriality and psychological ownership. For example, it is important to create a home environment and allow guests to take charge of the surroundings and fully engage with the facilities and amenities. For example, the host may do a better job during a pre-check-in contact and emphasizing strong territoriality and ownership for the guests. For example, the host can send a message like, please enjoy your personal vacation house in Cornwall. Please feel free to use everything you see during your stay. Just highlight the high territoriality and ownership for the guests. and the guests are less likely, and something to bear in mind with our findings for moderating effect of impermanence. The host should be very conscious about what messages they send to the guests during their stay. And they should try to avoid sending overly restrictive messages, and they should keep checking, guests during a stay. Some of the complaints online for Airbnb staying, like saying, oh, the host is constantly checking us during our stay. It's really restless. And for companies and marketers, Airbnb could be a new distributing platform for them. It's a very, very natural context, could be very efficient for Tryvertising, right? So for those companies who are interested to place their products, for example, coffee machines, smart speakers, or some like local foods, something like that, they could select suitable hosts with whom to place their products either for free or with discount, and they can leave a QR code to be attached to the Tryvertised goods and directing customers to actual information of purchasing deals. This is actually applied already in hotel context, but not many in Airbnb context. And those businesses could even issue like discount codes to the guests. The accommodation platforms, some people may ask questions. So does Airbnb should be involved in this Tryvertising relationship? It doesn't necessarily to be, because Airbnb is a global platform, and I assume the relationship between products and hosts is quite localized, regionalized. So it doesn't necessarily to involve Airbnb as a platform, and could be the relationship between local hosts and some local business, for example. And for consumers, it is also beneficial, to be honest, because customer can benefit from enriched experience while Airbnb staying by trying out the home appliances they didn't have at home. For example, like me, before I didn't have a coffee machine. I don't really realize it could be very useful for me to use it every day in the morning. And just trying out that product in the Airbnb context give me an enriched experience. I know something new, and I know, okay, I probably need to buy this thing. It could actually make my life easier and make my life even like more relaxed and enjoyable. So when on one hand, accommodation guests are able to assess how well a Tryvertised products fits their individual needs and the lifestyle during the stay with hands-on experience. Before staying in that Airbnb, I probably already noticed the selling of those coffee machines, but I didn't realize that it could be very useful. So by staying in the Airbnb, trying out some products like that way, I'll be able to know, okay, this is really fitting my needs. And on the other hand, it could help customer to save money, especially with the increasing costs in the UK nowadays, right? So people become more conscious by buying some home appliances like coffee machine, like smart speakers, So during an Airbnb staying, that by trying out some product, for example, a smart speaker, you probably find out, oh, it's a stupid idea by having something like that, because it's really not useful. It's constantly confuse your questions, something like that. And you can actually don't have to buy it. It's not useful. You actually end up saving money by avoiding purchasing certain items. So this, from a travel perspective, Tryvertising Airbnb also enrich customers' travel experience, because they'll be able to taste some authentic local culture or local Tryvertised products sponsored by local business. I remember during one of my Airbnb staying, we actually received a welcome basket with loads of local food, local products, and we end up like go out to buy those tasty breads again in a local shop. It's actually could very effective, very efficient to distribute people, direct people to the local business. And it's also very meaningful to contribute to local economy, local community. And also it helps sustainable tourism practice by encouraging both hosts and visitors to support and engage with the local community more closely. Right, so this is all. Thank you. Any question or comment for discussion? This is my email and contact. Oh, I noticed there's some chat.
Thank you. No, very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Maybe can you stop sharing the screen?
Right, okay.
Okay, thank you. That's better now. So we had a question from Evgenia in the chat, but I will recommend you, any one of you who want to make a question, just raise your hand or just use the mic and make your question. So Evgenia?
Yes, thank you, Jialin. I think you actually answered my question later on, after I posted. So I was just, I was asking, of the specific examples of when the psychological ownership is threatened. And I think you've mentioned it already, when hosts are being over-restrictive. I mean, I wonder if you have any other examples, maybe even from the literature or from your research, or do you think it's like a very new kind of area? Because I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so in previous research, I think just for example, in the article I mentioned published in Journal of Marketing in 2021, that conceptual paper is focusing on sharing economy, and they introduced a new concept like impermanence. And they already mentioned the impermanence of those sharing economy products, for example, like people renting car, and will threaten people's psychological ownership towards those products. People will know the car doesn't belong to me because this is sharing economy. So this is something from literature, very, very limited. It's a new thing. And in reality, as I just mentioned, that we believe like in the MBB context, especially with the cues, with the messages from the host, it doesn't necessarily to be writing messages from the host. Sometimes, as I mentioned, the host constantly coming back to checking the condition. This kind of cues of impermanence, this house belongs to her, not you, actually definitely threaten the formation of psychological ownership. You wouldn't believe that this house, it is mine, and the products inside it is mine. So that's an example, I believe.
I see. It's very interesting. So with the shared economy example from the literature, so how would it work? Does it mean that people would be less, for example, interested to buy the car because they sort of experience as a sharing? Like, is there more kind of deeper research on this, or are you amongst the pioneers?
Yeah. So if you're interested, I can share the article to you later. It mentioned quite a lot of context.
Right.
So by it is called limited access to products. For example, there are some online sharing economy music platform. You
Right.
just have limited time to access to the music. So
Right.
it is hard for people to develop a deeper attachment because you no longer have it, you just have temporarily experience it.
I see.
So it's not only about intangible products, also about those online platforms. So this is something new. It's actually could apply to many, many contexts in sharing economy. That's why I really feel like it could be important to share these insights and just inspire people to have a look different contexts doing future research.
Yes. No, thank you. That is now very clear. And can I also say that I really like how you link the research to your personal experience. When you were talking about coffee machines, like, oh, hold on, I had a similar experience with the washing machine when I was there. Like, I really, really enjoyed it. It was really relatable. So thank you very much for interesting presentation.
Thank you, Gina. Yeah, thank you for your kind words. My pleasure. Other questions?
Any other question, comment?
I have one question and a comment.
Marta.
Hi, Marta.
Okay. Hi, thank you for your presentation. It's very interesting paper. I think also very well presented. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You also suggest to include in the model the stakeholders, the relation between the guest and the host. In the case of Airbnb, what do you think about the relevance of the social interaction between the guest and the peer in this kind of advertise this product, and also the role of the trust in sharing economy. Okay, if you are also thinking for future research to include more variables in your model, but okay, but only to know about this, your thoughts and your opinion about that. But congratulations for your work, excellent work. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. That's very good questions. First one, I think this is a very interesting direction to go further, as you mentioned, like the social interaction between hosts and guests. So in our experimental research, we try to, because when you do experimental research, try to be clean, try to do not have so many distracting factors. So we assume the impermanence is just a written note attached to the coffee machine, beside the coffee machine, and there is no presence of a host. But in the future, this is really interesting thing. In the future, we probably could do a further research focusing on how hosts interact with guests, for example, by sending messages while social media, via the Airbnb platform, or by talking directly and use different scenarios. Or that could be a very interesting another research to go. Thank you very much for the insights, because it could have a different influence. For example, I guess hosts constantly showing their face come back, it could be the highest impermanence signal, for example. And another question, as you mentioned, the trust for the platform. I'm not sure whether it is really a concern in this scenario, because, as I mentioned, Airbnb doesn't have to be involved. I mean, in reality, to be honest, if you search online, does Airbnb got any Tryvertising products by themselves? Yes, there are some hosts and guests trying to argue, could Airbnb provide some sponsors like sleepers, like a cushion, but those sleepers and cushion with Airbnb logos. And with my research team, our co-authors, when we discuss this question, we feel like it actually against the feeling of titularity and the feeling of sense of home. Because if you got a logo with Airbnb in a home, it just makes the feeling another hotel. It's against the authenticity of a home. So I would say the involvement of Airbnb, such a platform, as you mentioned, it is a trust problem. It is also an authenticity problem. Sorry, I need to open the door for my colleagues. How many minutes? Sorry, I'm sharing office with my colleague and he's just coming.
It's fine.
It's all right. Did I answer your question, Marta?
Yes, thank you very much. Very clear.
Yeah, thank you for your question. This is really interesting question. I need to make some notes and for my future research, and acknowledge that this is from the question from Marta. Right, any other questions?
I have maybe more, let's say, practical question. Is I don't know if you're aware about the level of implementation of Tryvertising practices, if it's very early stage or not, because I see there's a lot of potential. For only in the UK, they claim that they have 7 million visitors in Airbnb accommodations.
Yeah.
And if companies or brands or also hosts, they find that there are new avenues of revenue, maybe there is a risk of commercialization. Maybe the visitors can feel some kind of pressure. You buy this, you don't buy this, you can use this, but this you cannot use the other one, and also can use like affiliated marketing. So my question is, the level of implementation, you see a lot of potential there, and also if you see it can be also a barrier for the visitors that they can feel somehow intimidated for so much pressure.
Yeah, I think in our original, thank you very much, Joe. So this is a really important question. during our writing for practical implication in the study, we already take it into consideration about, you know, the host should be very conscious about the way Tryvertising products, they should provide a stress-free experience, because they need to balance about, you know, these accommodation experience surveys between the Tryvertising thing. And we didn't really do the experiment, but we have thought about, you know, do experiment to compare when the Tryvertise products is so obvious, like they actually leave a note, okay, so this is product, you can buy it. So very obvious information or in the context. So in our current research scenario, we didn't make that obvious about you can buy that. We actually just do a branding Tryvertising rather than selling Tryvertising. Does that make sense?
Less
So,
aggressive, let's say, no?
Yeah. So the reason I buy that the coffee machine, probably because I wasn't being promoted. I just feel like, oh, this brand, I just increase my awareness of that brand, of that machine. So I think this is something deserves from some further thinking and research, because it could make difference. It might be effectiveness for Tryvertising as for branding, but rather than selling the products, could be.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph.
Good. So do we have any other comment or question?
I'm not sure if it's relevant. I hope you don't mind, Jialin, if I'm asking, but the whole concept of psychological ownership and impermanence, you know, the impact of impermanence, I wonder if it can be applied to understand better our students' experiences, not specifically for marketing, advertising, but even in another settings, you know, we try to teach our students and engage them. So I don't know if it's your area at all, but that's something that I was interested in. And I have a feeling that there is some disconnect sometimes with students, like, so I don't know, it's just that your presentation gave me a lot of ideas how to, what you found and the way you applied the logic that it could be applied in higher educational research. So I wonder if you had any thoughts about it or if you have any knowledge about that. Sorry if I'm asking if it's not your area, because I understand it's out of the blue question.
No, it's interesting. Like, yeah, so it would be something like a learning environment, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, how students can develop higher psychological ownership about
Of their own learning, of their own
learning. And we know, I'm not sure about your side, but our side with some, especially this term, we struggle with student attendance. And we
Yes.
wonder.
Yes.
And we wonder why they don't care, right? So how to develop and increase their psychological ownership about their own learning.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like a logic we can apply from marketing field into higher educational field to students. You know, it's your degree, it's your learning. I think now more and more there are more kind of factors that now impact student engagement. And I thought anyway, I thought your presentation was fascinating. Thank you so much. It was so interesting. Gave me lots of ideas from marketing, from HE, from my personal experiences. It was just very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, just to let you know that if you don't know that Evgenia is our director of teaching and learning. That's why.
Yeah, that's
she's
why
so
I have a hat on. Yes.
It is nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Good. Okay, any other comment or question?
Yeah, I have one, Josie. I guess it's on the
Wendy.
Hi, it's Wendy. Yeah. Thank you very much. That was fascinating presentation, and the examples were excellent. I think just coming back to Evgenia's point, I was thinking as well, it's really relevant in terms of, I was thinking more around sort of the lifestyle and the timing as well. So quite often, I mean, if you would take the example of students, you know, they can come in at the start quite sort of enthusiastic, and then it kind of, you know, attendance dwindles, that impact on the others kind of dwindles, and that ownership, if you like, can dwindle as well. So in terms of the life cycle of ownership, because I've just been having a look at and some of the points that you were mentioning around timing, are there any sort of particular points that you would pinpoint as being crucial in that in the timing of ownership that you've found or you've considered?
Right. So I assume timing is also relevant to context, right?
Yeah.
So although in this our research we didn't really test something, you know, highly relevant to timing, but I would emphasize psychological ownership is quite context specific. We couldn't assume in every context we have the same level of psychological ownership. For example, we know in shopping malls we have Tryvertising opportunities for using something, but it's surrounding with people in the public space. It will be, so the major difference is the territoriality. As we mentioned, in the home context, in the Airbnb context, we feel high territoriality, we feel safe, we feel more control towards the space.
Yes.
So I'm not sure. So for example, it could be interesting. I mean, if it is applied in a higher education context, as Amelia just mentioned, that we can have a look about the difference between distant learning when people staying at home on only taking online courses. What's the difference by attending the campus, especially from like psychological ownership, because the surrounding environment is different for them.
Yes.
And for timing, for psychological ownership, I believe something happening in the same time, same scenario would be different. For example, in a hotel context, if someone coming like a waiter, waitress, telling you something happening in the scenario, in the instant context timing, I think it could make a big difference.
Yes.
In terms of a longer experience time period.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Great presentation as well. Lots of things to think about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. It's been a very interesting presentation, a wonderful experience. Yes, to let you know that we will edit the video, we'll send it to you, we'll upload it in YouTube in our channel. And yes, a quick reminder that Marta Mas, she will be presenting with Frederick next week on the 13th. So looking forward to seeing you as well, Marta, next week.
Thank you. See you.
Good, see you soon. Have a
Thank
good day, everyone. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, Jose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.